Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first day of the 2018 MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, and welcome to the first talk in our Competitive Advantage series presented by Wasserman. My name is Caleb Galuzis. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and it is my pleasure to introduce our first talk, The Evolution of Golf Analytics. Today's presentation will be conducted by Mr. Peter Sanders from ShotByShot.com, so we'll get right into it, and please join me in welcoming Mr. Sanders to the stage.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. Am I coming through on? There you go. Evolution, I've got to go way, way back to 1983 when I was fortunate enough to join a golf club. So I thought, I got to become good at this game. So I took the advice of Golf Digest and started keeping my statistics. And these are those statistics. And it didn't take me long at all to figure out that I wasn't going to get much out of these numbers. For one thing, no comparative information other than the PGA Tour. As a 14 handicap, I found that data more depressing than helpful. The other thing that I found extremely depressing was this is what golf instruction looked like in those days. So let's look at a couple of the stats, and they're actually still very much in use. Fairways hit, the barometer of whether you were good at driving the ball or not. If you hit the fairways, that was good. If you missed, it wasn't. The problem with that is I learned that it's not the hit or the miss. It's the relative severity and the frequency of the misses. And there's 5 degrees of the severity. It can be a good miss. For a lot of amateurs, they're better off in the light rough than in the fairway. A poor miss, and then the 3 types of driving errors that I'll go into more later. Number of putts per round. This is perhaps the worst of all the statistics in that a number could tell you whether you were a good putter or not. It's very much like balancing your checkbook based upon the numbers of checks you wrote without regard to the amount. So these one-dimensional answers to a multi-dimensional game just didn't work. In 1999, the Tour created ShotLink, where every course that they use was mapped, and then they have 2 lasers in the field on the fairways, like the one on the right, and then one behind the green, and they capture every shot with an accuracy to within an inch. It takes 350 volunteers to pull this off, but the data is almost perfect. In 2011, the Tour added strokes gained putting. So we finally had a very accurate measure of whether someone was a good putter or not, and the rest of the game we were left to the myopic statistics. 2015, they added strokes gained tee to green. I found this interesting because it really was no added intelligence. It was just the difference between the strokes gained putting and whatever the strokes lost or saved was in total. For example, if a player were 4 shots worse than the field, and his strokes gained putting was 1 shot worse, then his strokes gained tee to green was -3. So no real intelligence there. But it took them 3 years to do it, 4 years to do it. In 2016, they added the other pieces of the strokes gained puzzle, the driving, approach shots, and the short game. So what is strokes gained? If you're out there and you know what it is already, you are in the vast minority. I start out all of my meetings with tour players and their coaches by giving these examples, and it invariably leads to very, very spirited conversations about what these numbers really mean and how do they relate to the traditional statistics that they all are so familiar with and have used for years and years. So in essence, it's a quantitative measure of each shot in the game, measured against a standard. And the calculation is the value, the down-in value of the starting position of the shot, the down-in value of the end position, plus the number of strokes it took to get there. I'll give you an example. Let's say we're in the fairway at 150 yards, and that down-in value is 3.00. That means the average tour player will hole out from that position in 3 shots. Now, 3 is not the exact number, but I rounded them off to make the math easier. But it's close. So say we hit it to 10 feet on the green with a down-in value of 1.7. So the calculation is 3 minus 1.7 plus the stroke it took to get there, 2.7. So the bottom line, the player has gained a 0.3 of a stroke. Take the same starting position, and they miss into a greenside sand trap with a value of 2.9. So the player has expended a stroke, but only gained 1/10 of a shot in position. So the value is 3 minus 2.9 plus 1, or a loss of 9/10 of a shot. Let's take a real-life example. This is the strokes gained ranking, not the strokes gained numbers, but the ranking after a PGA Tour event with a player with whom I've worked. And you can see he's ranked 35th off the tee, 10th approach, 5th on the greens, and putting. Now, the good news, he finished 2nd in this event, which is a big payday. The bad news, he didn't win. So putting ranked number 1, can't do any better than that. And the number 1 putter each week always does well if the rest of their game doesn't let them down. What about this ranked 35th in driving? So my job is to tell the coaches of this player exactly what happened that caused him to be ranked 35th and to lose by 2 shots. So I go to the ShotLink Stats. As you can see, there's 5 categories, 43 subcategories, and 635 stats. It's a lot to look through. But if we focus on the tee only, I've got 7 categories. I would look at the driving accuracy. And you have to take my word for it because we don't have much time and it does get a little boring. None of these statistics gave me any clue as to why he was not number 1, number 10, and he was number 35 in driving. In fact, they were kind of misleading. So bottom line, the tour stats, the data collection process, the strokes gained analysis, it's as perfect as I think we're going to get unless there's some other major breakthrough. The problem being the supporting stats just aren't. First of all, 650 statistics is way too many. And there is only 1 negative stat on tour, and it's 3 putts. In fact, there's 15 3-putt stats in these 650. So please do not tell the tour that they need to add these negative stats because it's very good for me that they don't have them. But I think most of the coaches that I deal with out there and the players, they view these stats as a giant, confusing scattergram. What I do differently is each week I download the tour's ShotLink data and I reprocess it my way. And I produce this 2-page report where I basically go through each of the major facets of the game and explain exactly why the player finished where they did. And I support it with a page of graphics. I look at driving errors, the 3 types of driving errors, approach penalties, which you can't find in the stats, short game errors, and I call a short game error on tour a shot that misses the green and it takes the player 4 or more shots to hole out. Putting, I also look at, but the tour does a pretty good job of 3 putts and 1 putts. So here's the example of this player's report card on the tee to green facet, or the driving facet. So the first thing I show on this little bar chart, I show the top 5 strokes gained, the field, and then the cut. And with this perspective, then I then place my player where they fall in regards to those 3, and I explain why. And so my player's closer to the field than he is to the top 5, but he finished second. I then add to it fairways hit. Everybody likes to see fairways hit. And he did really well there. He hit more fairways than did the top 5, so that's not helping me. Driving errors per round. This is what I talked. He had 5 driving errors, 3 no shots where he was behind a tree, under a bush. It took an advancement shot for him to get the ball back in play, and 2 penalty shots. I mean, for a good player, that's unacceptable. So I was able to tell his coaches exactly what happened. Now look at some of the other analysis that I do and the ways I do it. I look at putting is important. It's 40% of the game for everybody. But I see it as 2 different skills. A short putting skill, putts up to 20 feet, and the distance control skill. As you start very, very close to the hole, basically the only thing that matters is direction. As you move away from it, direction becomes less important, and touch and feel and distance become important. So I created, when I look at one putts, it's very easy, and the tour has all this. Look at the various ranges, and I can compare my players to the top 5, the field, the top 25, depending on where they fall in the grand scheme of things. But I found that in the short putting skill, there's 2 very important ranges. The 6 to 10 foot range, because it invariably occupies more opportunities than any of the other short putting ranges. It also the 8 foot, 50% make falls right in the middle of it. And I find that distance range separates the players who are good putters from the players who aren't. Then there's the 11 to 20 foot range, which clearly separates the winners. Every week, the player who wins makes an inordinate number of these putts outside 10 feet. Then there's the distance control skill. I put together an analysis of 6 parameters, and I put the #1 strokes gained putter each year through it. And so I collect this database of what distance control looks like at a very high level of the game. And I also have, of course, the tour averages. And I can compare my players to those parameters and say, well, here's what you're not doing that the #1 putter is doing, or here's what you are doing that they're doing. And they are average start distance, average leave distance. That's simple. Percentage 1 putts, percentage 3 putts. And then successful lags. I came up with an algorithm that a successful lag putt is to within 7% of the original distance, the original starting distance, or 3 feet. Anything within 3 foot is like, because they make 99% of their 3-footers. An error, any lag that doesn't get within 10% of the original distance or 3 feet. And then percentage of putts that get to the hole or past it, and the average leave. So this tends to be 33% of first putting opportunities. So I got a call in early 2016 from an editor at Golf Digest, and he wanted some help with an article that he was putting together on Jordan Spieth and why Jordan Spieth was so good. And fortunately, I had already done this analysis on Jordan because he was off the charts that year. He won 5 times, he won 2 majors, and was ranked #1 on tour and #1 in the world. His strokes gained putting was ranked 9th, and as I told the editor, I think he was the #1 putter in the world and would have been ranked that if the majors in which he played and won if their data had gone into ShotLink. None of the majors, Masters, Open, or British Open, their data does not go into ShotLink. So he was intrigued by that. And what I found when I ran Jordan Spieth through my distance control analysis is he was better in every one of those 6 parameters than all of the prior 5-year #1 putters on tour, which I thought was incredible. So this nice man, instead of including my numbers in his article, published a standalone article on this under my name, and it got some good publicity. If any of you would like it, you can probably find it, but if not, email me, call me, I'll send it to you. Value of hitting the fairways. This has always been of contention, but in the years that I've worked with Zach Johnson, he already knew that hitting the fairways was a very important part of his ability to win money, because he was not a very long hitter. So I always say everyone on tour is under par from the fairway, and people say, well, what do you mean by that? If you look at the fairway scores, this is scores after a player has hit the fairway, the tour, the top 5, even the players that missed the cut, average under par. And then from the rough, they don't, except the top 5 do. So the average is about a quarter of a shot between playing from the fairway and playing from the rough. And this is a graph that I did for Zach Johnson years ago, and it's the approach shots, the percentage of shots that hit the green. The top line is from the fairway, and the bottom line is the rough, and there are all of the distance ranges underneath it. I've circled the 151 to 175 because that invariably occupies more approach attempts than any other distance. And so you can see by this chart that in order to have the same success from the rough that the average tour player has from 151 to 175 yards, you've got to advance the ball 75 yards further. So my message to the players with whom I work is if you have to lay back 25, 30, 35 yards to avoid the rough or trouble, you're not giving up any shots, you're gaining shots. Par 5s, go for it or not go for it. This was 7 years ago when I had my first meeting with Zach and his entourage. This question came up, and it was a spirited discussion. There were people in the room that had strong opinions on either side, that he should always lay up to his great distance, or he should go for the greens. So I did this. I knew the answer, but I did this little study for them, and I update it every year. So if we say the 75 to 100 yard range is the ideal layup range for just about everybody on tour, they tend to hit the green 85% of the time and to an average of 15 feet. But note, they miss the green 15% of the time. From less than 50 yards, so they've gone for the green in 2, first they can hit it, then that's almost a guaranteed birdie and opens up eagle opportunities. But from the short game opportunities, if they miss the green, they hit the green 93% of the time to an average of 7 feet. They've just cut their errors in half, and their average putting distance in half. So my message is, if there's no obvious downside, if there's no out of bounds, if there's no looming water, go for the green every time. And Zach's numbers are actually even better than this because he's got a great short game. In conclusion, golf is a complicated puzzle at every level of the game. With ShotLink collecting the tour data and with their strokes gained analysis, we're getting a lot better at ciphering through the pieces of the puzzle for tour players. And for the rest of us out there who are struggling with our games, there's ShotByShot.com to help you with your puzzle. Thank you very much.